911 operators. What is the scariest or strangest call you've ever gotten? Scariest was a woman who called and said her husband had a gun and was threatening to kill himself in front of her. While the officers were on the way, they wanted to talk to her. While I was transferring her, she said, "He's pointing the gun at me," but luckily the officer picked up right after and I could disconnect. I was still in training at the time, so it was scary. Worst call was an old man who called saying he accidentally ran over his son with his combine. His son tripped while he was next to the big wheel and went under it. He was crushed. I froze for a solid 10 seconds, not knowing what to do because my mind went blank. This was when I was fresh out of training. So I was still inexperienced with that level of intensity. Not a 911 operator but a paramedic. Strangest/scariest would have to be when we got a dispatch for a cardiac arrest. The dispatcher told us that a woman had found her sister in a bag and was screaming about not being able to find her legs but was too hysterical to answer any clarifying questions. Turns out the woman had gone to her sister's house because they hadn't seen or heard from her in a week, which was odd. She found her sister dismembered in a trash bag in the backyard and some of her limbs were in a burn barrel nearby. Sister's husband had killed her and was trying to dispose of the body. Three years ago, a 5-year-old girl found her parents dead in their bedroom with blood all over the place and a bullet on the floor. She was in the backyard and heard some shots, and after 2 hours of hiding she found the body. Oh, there are just so many. Many times I've walked people through CPR after someone calls 911 to say their spouse isn't breathing. Crew arrives and finds an elderly patient doing CPR on a blanket or a pillow. No ill intent, just mental health problems. Took a call where a guy was stabbed. Just wanted to keep him talking, so asked if he knew who did it. He named the guy and then stopped responding. Seconds later, dead when the crew arrived. Fairly rare, but we sometimes get calls from people saying their pet isn't breathing or is choking and they want us to walk them through CPR or send help. I've taken 3 calls where people chopped off their penis. 2 of them were sitting in a tub. 1 had microwaved it. I would say 50% of all calls are related to drugs and alcohol. Maybe 25% are mental health related and then 25% random accidents or medical emergencies. I have a friend who works for a crisis line. A call came through from a guy standing on the wrong side of the barrier on a bridge. He was ready to jump. After some time, my friend convinced him to climb over onto the right side. As he was climbing over, he slipped and fell off the bridge. His family will never know that he had actually changed his mind and it wasn't suicide. My friend was gutted. Filled in as a 911 operator and dispatcher for a rural county a few decades ago. Got a call for an MVA one night. The car had gone off a 60-foot embankment, ending up upside down in a shallow river. As calls played out, there had been 6 occupants, all deceased. Bodies found from the accident site to half-mile downriver. 3 of the occupants had been friends or acquaintances of mine. The stress of knowing that and taking calls from family members I knew most of the night soured my young self on the job. Please give rural first responders extra support. PTSD by proxy is a real thing. Coast Guard Command Center. So the maritime version of 911, you call Mayday on the radio. I pick up. Probably when I got the call that we lost one of our own helicopters. I never saw the report. But from what I gathered, they were trying to take off and the winds, this was hurricane response, caused them to crash at takeoff. Everyone got out and no lasting injuries. But the helo caught fire and I'm pretty sure had to be scrapped. For sure one of the more memorable ones, since it's different when it's one of your own, and also aircraft emergencies tend to kill people a lot better than sinking boats. Not an operator myself, but used to know one. She always said the toughest calls were from parents that had accidentally hurt their kids. She once got one from a dad who had accidentally backed over his son playing in the driveway with his car. She didn't think that man would ever get right again. She wasn't sure she would. She also had more than one calls from parents that had brought their babies into bed with them, rolled onto them in the night and suffocated them. Those were the ones that haunted her. The ones where she knew she couldn't help. Not the injured. Nor the ones that had caused the injury. Ex-boyfriend did 999 calls for a while in the 90s. Got a call from a father who had just walked into his teenage son's room to find he'd shot himself. Ex asked the dad if there was a pulse. And the dad just went quiet and said his son had used his dad's shotgun. And his head was gone. Ex just talked to the guy while the ambulance police arrived. He said he just sounded hollow and talked about a note and how he'd written that he'd owed money. I think it was 5,000. In 90s I guess 10k today equivalent today, and was trapped. Ex quit soon after as he couldn't handle the nightmares. 911 dispatcher for 13 years here. Scariest call I ever took was a man who told me about how he set his girlfriend on fire. He walked into a gas station smelling like gasoline and asked them to call 911 so he could turn himself in. They then put the man on the phone with me and he said that he thought she was running around on him and he couldn't take it, so he just set her on fire. I had to talk to the man and make sure he'd turn himself in peacefully. Next was a woman who was hiding under her bed. Two men had broken into her house and was holding her boyfriend hostage in the bathroom, and they didn't realize she was there under the bed. She was pregnant at the time and got wedged under the bed and stuck. I was 5 months pregnant at the time, so it was very memorable. A deputy happened to be close by and got there in less than 4 minutes, but they had already shot and killed the boyfriend. Hearing his screaming and then her screaming when she realized he was dead will stick with me for the rest of my life.